Hi guys, welcome back or welcome to DreamWorks Switch to Life. And in today's video, we're going to be discussing DreamWorks' latest movie, which isn't even animated. That, of course, is the live-action How to Train Your Dragon remake. And oh boy, I just have to say, this is probably the single greatest live-action remake I've ever seen. Granted, I do have a lot of notes when it comes to this. First off, I need to talk about the casting choices. I really loved most of the cast here. Gerard Butler coming back to play Stoic was a really great choice, and honestly, he brought his A game. In fact, dare I say, he was probably more emotional in this live-action remake than his character ever was in the animated version, which is really good. Then there's Mason Thames, who, while he sounds nothing like Hiccup, voiced by Jay Birchall, embodies Hiccup to the point where it's like one in the same character, and I really enjoyed that. And then there's Nico Parker. She does an amazing job at Astrid. And I know that there's been a lot of backlash over the fact that she's not blonde, the fact that she's not white, but honestly, she's perfect in the role. And also, they do address this issue in the actual film. Again, I know there's a lot of backlash, but before the movie even came out, I was out there telling people that Viking are seafarers. It's common for them to come across many different races and ethnicities in order to make up their tribe, and that's actually addressed in the movie itself, and I really loved that. And of course, there's also just the fact that Nico Parker is awesome, and she brought Astrid to life in a way that I don't think any other teenage girl could. And then there's the various other characters. I loved Fishlegs, I loved Snotlout, they both had amazing actors. However, I do have 3 problems with the casting decisions overall. First off, Nick Frost as Gobber the Belch. He just didn't really feel like Gobber the Belch. Call me crazy, but the accent was just way off. Not to mention, this guy's acting was super weird and definitely nowhere near as good as the original voice actor. But of course, I do like the fact that they used CGI to actually give him artificial limbs. You can see him limping on his peg leg, and you can see most of his arm is gone when they're giving him the various hand attachments, and I really loved that. Of course, we also need to talk about another problem, and that is Rough Nut and Tough Nut. In the animated version, these guys are twins who look exactly the same. Here, they're still twins, but they look completely different. They couldn't be any more different. And the fact that they're being played by adults instead of teenagers is kind of bad. Then again, they did acknowledge this in the film by saying that Rough Nut and Tough Nut were held back and too valuable to let go, so they never graduated from dragon training. And with all of that in mind, I have one final complaint, and it's honestly a pretty easy fix that they could do in the potential sequels. That, of course, is Jay Baruchel was not a cameo in the movie, and I'm so mad about it. Wouldn't it have been awesome to just have the original voice of Hiccup be a small cameo in the movie? Heck, he could have played a major character like Spitalout, and I would have been really happy. Unfortunately, that's not how it played out. But I did come up with a brand new idea that I personally really love. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. What if he got cast as a major role in one of the sequels? I was thinking maybe Eret, but then I just realized he doesn't really have the build for that. He doesn't have that buff physique. Then I realized, wait, what if he came back as Grimmel the Grizzly? Think about it. Who would be better to play the villain who's meant to be a rival to Hiccup than the original voice of Hiccup? It just makes so much sense. Grimmel was Hiccup if he'd went down a dark road. Well, what if we just hired Hiccup to play him? Now, I'm not really sure about Jay Birchall's acting capabilities. He might be able to portray the villain, he might not. But either way, that's just a fan casting that I really want to happen. Now it's time to dive into the cinematography. Now, when I say this, I do mean the cinematography was super amazing. I loved all of the camera angles. However, I do need to mention something. I went to go see this movie in a D-box theater, meaning that the chairs are moving around under you. So when I say that it feels like you're on the back of a dragon moving around, I am kind of referring to the D-box thing. It's just one experience that just made this movie even better for me. But of course, the cinematography, camera angles, the fact that you're moving with the dragons at super high speed, you're going through the stunts with the Vikings, and of course, it's just so cool. I loved all the camera angles, the cinematography, the CGI was simply amazing. I loved all of the dragons and their new designs, especially the Red Death, because, well, you can tell that it's actually red now and not just gray, which is really good. But of course, there's also the many dragon movements. The way they moved was super cool, super fluid, and it just made them feel like the dragons were actually there interacting with the humans, and that's really cool. I also really enjoyed the fact that they weren't just limited to like 7 different species. They had multiple species from throughout the entire franchise. Like, I even saw a Rumblehorn at one point. I just loved all of the dragon redesigns in this movie, with the exception of Toothless. I mean, yes, Toothless is still cute, he's still cuddly, he's still ferocious, but then you compare him to the other dragons, and he's an outlier. He's too cute and cuddly to be a dragon in this universe. In the animated version, it worked because all of the dragons in their own way behaved like various animals. Here in the live action, though, they're just big, ferocious, scary, and Toothless isn't. He's just an oversized puppy dog, and that's not good. I mean, yes, it is faithful to his character. He was basically a giant Black Panther kitty cat in the animated version, but also in the animated version, Toothless fit in with the dragon crowd. He felt like a dragon. Here, he's just a cute, cuddly, scaly dragon compared to the more ferocious, scary dragons, and it's kind of sad. I do like the fact that Toothless is kept faithful to his animated counterpart, but unfortunately, the rest of the dragons aren't, and because of it, they just come across as bigger, scarier, more intimidating, and Toothless, again, just a cuddle bug. Now, I also want to talk about the set designs, and let me just say, I loved them. You could really feel like you're stepping into the world of Berk. And I know that there's a lot of footage of me showing the characters going across doing stunts in front of a blue screen, but that's because they're in a controlled environment. However, when they're actually acting, they're on a set that looks exactly like the animated version. And it just makes the film come alive in a way that, well, CGI never could. And that's really cool. Now it's time to dive into the music. And let me just say, the music is awesome. Just like always, How to Train Your Dragon music is super cool, super iconic, and definitely something that is very fun to listen to. I do have one complaint that there's not a lot of differences from the animated version, but then again, that's what John Powell was going for. In his own words,
"If I've done my job right, people will think I haven't done anything different at all." But there are a lot of differences going on, and I'm trying to make them feel as if they always were there.
So with that in mind, I think it's actually really good that the music is super faithful, and honestly, it just makes sense. How to Train Your Dragon is just one of those movies that's praised for its soundtrack. Why would you mess with perfection? Actually, there was one nitpick that I have with the music, and that was during the test drive sequence. Instead of the music getting dark and ominous when Hiccup falls off Toothless, it goes for more of a Viking choir as if they're gonna fall to their death, and unfortunately, you can't even hear any of the action that's going on screen. I don't know about you guys, but I actually want to hear Toothless accidentally slap Hiccup in the face. Speaking of, there's also the fact that the script is kinda samey. Like, you could literally just watch the movie and 90% of the time, it's the same movie as the animated version. Now, that's good if you wanted it to be faithful, which I did. Why mess with perfection? But if you're looking for something different, Well, this movie has that too. So this movie is 10% different from the original. Throughout the movie, there are extra lines, extra stunts, extra scenes that are included that weren't in the original, and it's just super cool. They also tweaked a few lines from the original, and that's okay too, because it just made the emotions hit a little bit harder in some cases. I don't know about you, but there's definitely a mixture where some lines are delivered better in live action, some lines are better delivered in the animated version, and that's okay. But then, of course, there's also the fact that a few lines were cut from the animated version. For instance,
"Excuse me, barmaid. I'm afraid you brought me the wrong offspring. I ordered an extra large boy with beefy arms, extra guts and glory on the side. This is a talking fish bone."
yeah, that scene is gone. But there's also plenty of scenes that stuck around, scenes that are funny, and they also added a few more scenes to make the humor even better, and that's really cool. But they also added plenty of side plots to make the story even more interesting. For instance, let's talk about Astrid. They changed so much with her character, for the better if you ask me. She's still the warrior queen that we all know and love, but I think in this movie, she's actually 100 times better because she has a goal in life. Shockingly, she wants to become the next chief of the tribe, taking over for Stoic the Vast because Hiccup is such a disappointment. And that's really good. It's definitely a great change that I like. And because of it, Astrid is always putting herself out there. There's the iconic line, "So I guess it's just you and me, huh?" Nope, just you. Well, it's changed to,
"Looks like it's just you and me, huh?"
Nope, just me.
which is really good and definitely a great change for her character. However, there is one change that might be controversial. The fact that because of the different race, they decided to make it so Astrid isn't from Berk. She's actually from another island entirely, and she comes from a land has no name or identity, and that's another reason why she's striving to become chief. I don't know about you guys, but personally, I want them to dive into that in the sequel, and especially, I want a tragic backstory with Astrid and her parents. Maybe they could talk about how her parents died in the battle against the dragons, and that's why she's pushing herself so hard. One change that I liked, though, was the final battle with the Red Death, where usually in the animated version, she's being sucked into the Red Death's mouth, and then Stormfly is trying to fly away, and eventually Astrid falls off after a plasma blast from Toothless, and Toothless has to rescue her. But in the live-action version, Stormfly actually gets her tail caught in the Red Death's mouth, and Astrid jumps into the Red Death's mouth and begins hacking away at the Red Death's teeth, meaning that she gets a warrior moment in the final battle, and that's really, really good. Speaking of, there's also a few other changes to characters, like Fish Legs, for instance. In the animated franchise, later in the TV show, and especially the sequel movies, he began dragon trading cards that was like giving brief facts about dragons and the way to train them, which is really cool. But here in the live action version, he still has those cards, and that's really good. But my personal favorite change that they made was with Snotlout's character. Not only did they go into depth of why he's named such a stupid name like Snotlout, which is basically Viking for beat the snot out of your enemies, but they also gave him a beautiful relationship with his father, who throughout the majority of the movie is constantly disappointed in his son. And honestly, that's something that was in the animated franchise too. It wasn't in any of the movies, it was mostly in the TV show, but the fact they brought it from the TV show to the live action remake is super good. Now, this would typically be the part where I dive into the story, but honestly, the story doesn't really change at all from the animated version. So just go watch my animated movie review and you'll get the gist of the story. Because of that, though, the script and especially this movie could have been seen as a one-to-one copy, but it wasn't. Every 15 seconds, there was something new that wasn't in the animated version, or at the very least, something that was changed from the animated version. And that's really really good. But the story, the heart, the emotions, it's all still there. And that's really, really amazing. But now it's time for my final thoughts. Is this movie better than the animated version? Well, I'm conflicted. I want to say yes, I really do. In fact, I literally asked my YouTube community a couple of questions. First, what was their favorite live action remake? And if they liked this movie better than the animated version. And while it's still kind of split, it's more so leaning towards the live action, which, yeah, I'm actually thinking the same thing is happening with me. The entire time I was in my theater, which again was D-box seating, I was giddy the entire time. If you don't know, How to Train Your Dragon is my favorite franchise of all time. Seeing it brought back to life on the big screen in a brand new way while still feeling that nostalgia every single minute was super, super cool. And I was just super giddy, especially during the final battle with the Red Death and the test drive sequence. That could mostly be from the D-box thing, but honestly, this movie was just made for D-Box, even though it advertises it was made for IMAX. In fact, I'm actually going to go see it in IMAX later today. But with that in mind, which was better, the live-action version or the animated version? Honestly, I really hate to say this, the live-action version might be the superior film. But of course, that's only just because it copied the animated version in a 90% match, which, whether that's good or bad, is up to viewer interpretation. Because why would you mess with perfection? So honestly, while I do think that the live-action remake can be criticized for its lack of originality, I do believe that it can be praised as the superior version of the original How to Train Your Dragon film. Now, if you ask me, nothing will ever replace the animated franchise, especially because the live-action remake is probably never going to get a TV show. But with all that out of the way, what do you guys think of this movie? Be sure to leave your thoughts down below in the comment section. Whether you enjoyed this movie or thought that it didn't change enough that made it so it was completely worthless. But I do want to remind you guys, this is way better than How to Train Your Dragon 4. If there's one thing that Toy Story 4 and now Toy Story 5 has acknowledged, it's better to end a franchise with a super good ending than go back and make a cash grab sequel. This was the best of both worlds. By making it a live-action remake instead of How to Train Your Dragon 4, not only is Universal getting their money's worth from the franchise, but we're also getting to see the franchise in a whole new light, and that's really, really cool. Also, writer and director Dean DeBlois said that this movie was going to happen with or without him, and he figured, might as well be with me since I helped create this world. And so not only would it be faithful to the original, but also it was just a great step for him to direct his first live-action movie. But with all of that in mind, be sure to leave your thoughts down below in the comment section. And also, what DreamWorks property do you guys want to see remade next? We know that the next DreamWorks live-action remake is going to be How to Train Your Dragon 2, but what franchise do you want to see next? Be sure to leave your thoughts down below in the comment section. And also, if you want to help support the channel, feel free to join my membership program by clicking the join button down below, or you could just do the free option and subscribe to the channel. But with all of that in mind, make sure that you're staying safe out there, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye bye.
He's got a mind of his own. Gets that from his mother. Look what happened to her.
Yeah, because Valka was the stubborn one.